一生要想得着捷径，心情大到变化，活出一个有意义的人生，尽到受造之物的本分，得接受神的刑罚审判，让神的管教击打不离开，使你脱离撒旦的摆布，脱离撒旦的权势，活在神的光中。你得知道神的刑罚审判就是光，就是拯救人的光，就是人最好的祝福，是最大的恩典，最好的保守。你得知道神的刑罚审判就是光，就是拯救人的光，就是人最好的祝福，是最大的恩典，最好的保守。
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
I find this hymn of God's words deeply moving. I used to live by sayings like distinguishing oneself, and man struggles upwards, water flows downwards, and other of Satan's poisons. I was damaged by Satan for seeking status and fame, always worrying about my status. It was painful to live. It wasn't until I experienced the judgment of God's words that I came to understand my own corrupt nature and gained some clarity on the consequences of seeking fame. I finally started to feel remorse. I no longer wanted to live that way, but just pursue the truth and perform my duty well.
Thanks be to God.
Thank God. I remember September of 2016. My duty was on the hymn team. Soon, our leader came to discuss picking a team leader. As soon as I heard this, I got really excited and began to consider the prospective candidates. Other people on my team were either too young or not skilled to be team leader. There was just Brother Lee. He was practical in his fellowship and knew the work. Plus, he had a calm demeanor. I felt that there was a good chance he'd be picked. But my own fellowship wasn't bad either. Plus, I was a good learner and quick to pick up new things. I always saw the big picture. So I figured my chance would be better than his. But everyone in the team was new to that duty and hadn't worked there long, so we didn't know each other well. Whether they would choose me, I had no idea. So I suggested to the leader that he tally up the duties each of us had fulfilled, then designate a temporary team leader. Everyone agreed. I was secretly pleased by this. I felt I had a good track record in my duty. So when it came to being picked, I thought my chances were really good. The next day, I went to the gathering full of confidence. But to my surprise, Brother Lee was the person they had picked for the job. I just felt really disappointed then. But to save face, I stoically said, "Thanks be to God. Now let's all work together in our duties." But deep down, I couldn't accept it. I felt completely drained of energy on my walk home. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Why Brother Lee and not me? I couldn't accept it. I felt that by picking someone else but not me with talents, weren't they wasting my skills? I had to prove myself, to show the others what I was made of, even though I appeared calm on the surface. After that, I quietly pitted myself against Brother Lee. I worked hard studying, so I could improve my skills and outdo him. I was glad he was slow to learn, and thought to myself, so the truth comes out. You're not so great, and eventually, our brothers and sisters will see who's better. With every mistake he made, I reveled a bit, thinking to myself, do you have what it takes? Others will see. And I felt jealous when I saw him resolve others' issues. I thought, I too have practical experience. I'd be good at fellowshipping if I were team leader. Especially when we discussed work. No matter what Brother Lee suggested, I would scramble to say something more insightful than what he said. I remember there was one meeting, and we were discussing ideas for a hymn. Brother Lee made a suggestion that was really good. But I thought that if I accepted it, wouldn't he look better than me? How could I hold my head up? I said I didn't like his idea and suggested something else. But the whole group ended up choosing his suggestion. It felt like a slap in the face. Seeing all the group discussing it with fervor, I felt even more opposed to Brother Lee and didn't even want to listen. In my previous duty, I had been the team leader, and the others looked up to me. But now, I wasn't team leader, and he was looking better than me. If I had known, I wouldn't have come here. After the gathering, I couldn't seem to get out of my own head, and my spirit was dark. Vaguely aware that I wasn't in the right state, I then prayed to God. Then these words came to mind. Before I created you, I already knew of the unrighteousness that existed deep in the human heart, and I knew all the deception and crookedness in the human heart. Therefore, even though there are no traces at all when people do unrighteous things, I still know that the unrighteousness harbored within your hearts surpasses the richness of all things I created. Every one of you has risen to the pinnacle of the multitudes, ascended to be the ancestors of the masses. You are extremely arbitrary, and you run amok among all the maggots, seeking a place of ease, and attempting to devour the maggots that are smaller than you. You are malicious and sinister in your hearts, surpassing even the ghosts that have sunk to the bottom of the sea. You reside in the bottom of the dung, disturbing the maggots from top to bottom until they have no peace, fighting each other for a while and then calming down. You do not know your place, yet you still battle with each other in the dung. What can you gain from such struggle? If you truly had reverence for me in your hearts, how could you fight with each other behind my back? No matter how high your status, are you not still a stinking little worm in the dung? Will you be able to sprout wings and become a dove in the sky? God's words exposed all of the ugliness of my vying for name and gain. Since joining the hymn team, I had too much ambition, dying to achieve something, so all the others would think that I was the best, and that I could get a foothold in the team. In the selection process, I tried to use my wits to my advantage, getting the leader to select one based on our past performance in the duties. But when Brother Lee was picked, I became jealous and harbored a competitive attitude. Whenever I saw issues in the work he'd done, I didn't uphold the church's interests or try to help him. But I wanted him to be replaced so that I could have a shot at his job. My satanic disposition of seeking this name and gain meant that I was devoid of conscience or reason. It was toxic and despicable. When I realized I was this way, I really reproached myself. I prayed to God and asked him to help me practice truth, so I would no longer be controlled by my corruption. One day, I read this in God's words. For each of you fulfilling your duty, no matter how profoundly you understand the truth, if you wish to enter the reality of the truth, then the simplest way to practice is to think of the interests of God's house in everything you do and to let go of your selfish desires, your individual motives, face, and status. Put the interests of God's house first. This is the least that you should do. If a person performing their duty cannot do even this much, then how can they be said to be performing their duty? This is not performing one's duty. God's words had shown to me the direction in performing my duty, which meant letting go of my desire for status, putting the church's work first no matter what, and doing my duty the very best that I could. Then I'd be doing the duty of a created being, like I should be.
Exactly.
If I sought name and status over my main work, that wasn't fulfilling my duty. I'd be resisting God and doing evil. Later, in a gathering, I opened up to my brothers and sisters about all of this, revealing my own corruption. The others didn't look down on me, and the wall between me and Brother Lee disappeared.
Thank God.
After that, I shared fellowship during gatherings he chaired, and didn't laugh or snicker when I saw flaws in any of his work. Instead, I offered support and suggestions. When I saw him helping brothers and sisters resolve their issues, I wasn't jealous like before. I felt that in God's house, it's our roles that differ, but not our standing.
That's right.
That's right.
I just wanted to work together to do our duties well. When I put that into practice, I felt much more at ease. And later, I saw God's blessings. Though in the past, our team had the worst musical foundations, it didn't take long before we'd produced a Spanish language song, and other brothers and sisters liked it a lot.
Thank God.
About half a year passed, and I was becoming more familiar with the work. The brothers and sisters would often accept my ideas whenever we were discussing work, and our monthly team work exchanges were usually led by me. I felt my need for name and status had been satisfied, and at that time, our leader had me do more to drive the work in our team. Having my leader's esteem made me feel even more like I was a valuable talent. One time, we needed someone for an extra task, and even though it was right up my alley, I thought about it hard first. It'd take up a lot of time for no attention. So if I did it, I'd probably lose some of the attention I had. But if Brother Lee did it, I could make my own niche in the team. I thought of every excuse to turn it down, saying Brother Lee could do it. The truth is that I felt really guilty and unsettled, but I still remained stubborn so I could protect my position. Brother Lee moved to that unfamiliar job. He became negative after he encountered things that were hard, which impacted his work. After I heard, I still didn't reflect. Brother Lee was often unable to work with us, so most matters large and small would then become my problem. My desire for name and status only became worse. I saw that there were some shortcomings in our brothers and sisters' work that slowed us down, which made me anxious. I was in charge of this work, so if something went wrong, what would the leader think of me? Would he think that I was incompetent? So then I lost my temper, and I scolded them. You call this doing your duty? Can't you focus? Just do better. They all felt really constrained by how I acted. Another time, I had to leave for a few days, and when I got back, I saw a sister had made a new work plan without telling me. It made me angry. I thought, what is this? You don't respect my authority. I really yelled at this sister. Meanwhile, the team's problems started to pop up. The others on the team weren't accepting my ideas, even giving me feedback. I was offended by this, and my temper exploded. If you all don't want to accept my ideas, just do what you want. See how that goes. Just don't expect me to take the fall when things go wrong. After that, I felt this inexplicable panic and self-reproach. I then thought about how I had been arrogant and always losing my temper. Would God approve? But then I thought, wasn't it all for the sake of my duty? Everyone's corrupt, not just me. I had not genuinely reflected on myself. And then the next day, I sprained my ankle. It was really painful, and it swelled up. I couldn't do my duty, or even walk. I quickly realized that this was God's discipline. And I finally started to reflect. I had been seeking name and status, being arrogant and scolding others. I recalled the whole thing scene by scene, like a movie in my mind. I then wondered, why did I still not change? Why couldn't I stop rebelling against God? A few days later, some brothers and sisters came to see me and fellowship with me. They read a passage of His words that really fit my state. If some people see someone better than they are, they suppress them, start a rumor about them, or employ some unscrupulous means so that other people don't look highly upon them, and that no one is any better than anyone else, then this is the corrupt disposition of arrogance and self-rightness, as well as crookedness, deceitfulness, and insidiousness, and these people stop at nothing to achieve their aims. They live like this and yet still think they're great and that they're good people. However, do they have God-fearing hearts? First of all, to speak from the perspective of the natures of these matters, are not people who act this way simply doing as they please? Do they consider the interests of God's family? They think only of their own feelings, and they want only to achieve their own aims, regardless of the loss suffered by the work of God's family. People like this are not only arrogant and self-right, but also selfish and contemptible. They are utterly inconsiderate of God's intention. And people like this, without a shadow of a doubt, do not possess God-fearing hearts. This is why they do whatever they want and act wantonly, without any sense of blame, without any trepidation, without any apprehension or worry, and without considering the consequences. They do not fear God. They believe themselves to be of utmost importance, and they regard every aspect of themselves as being higher than God and higher than the truth. In their hearts, God is the least worthy of mention and the most insignificant, and God does not have any status in their hearts at all. Have those who have no place for God in their hearts and who do not revere God attained entry into the truth? No. So when they typically go around merrily keeping themselves busy and exerting quite a lot of energy, what are they doing? Such people even claim to have abandoned everything to expend for God and suffered a great deal. But actually, the motive, principle, and objective of all their actions are to benefit themselves. They are only trying to protect all of their own interests. Would you or would you not say that this sort of person is terrible? What sort of person, would you say, is one who does not revere God? Is he or she arrogant? Is such a person Satan? What kinds of things do not revere God? Apart from the animals, all those that do not revere God include demons, Satan, the archangel, and those who contend with God. These words of God were harsh and hit me hard. I saw I'd been so arrogant, selfish, and sly, without reverence for God. When the church needed collaboration, I knew perfectly well that I couldn't do it. But to maintain my own name, my own status, I acted selfishly, which hurt the church's work. If one of the team made a mistake that hindered our progress, big or small, I didn't work with them to help fix or resolve it. I just thought they were dragging me down and hurting my chance to stand out. I would scold them for my high position, and they felt constrained and suffered because of it. I wouldn't take their suggestions, no matter what they were. I would sulk, get mad, use my duty to vent, never thinking or considering the work of the church. Actually, I didn't have any real talent at all. All I had was interest in music and enthusiasm. But God graciously gave me this opportunity, so I could make progress professionally and in pursuit of the truth. Instead of cherishing it, I sought status and prestige. I pursued my own interests under the guise of my duty, exploiting my team as a tool to help me get ahead. I lacked humanity. In my actions, I was doing evil and offending God's disposition. It was disgusting to God. When I realized, I felt such fear and regret. As I cried, I prayed to God, "Oh God, I was wrong. I don't want to be rebellious against you. or fight for personal gain. I want to repent. Later, I read these words of God. What does Satan use to keep man firmly within its control? Fame and gain. So Satan uses fame and gain to control man's thoughts until all people can think of is fame and gain. They struggle for fame and gain, suffer hardships for fame and gain, endure humiliation for fame and gain, sacrifice everything they have for fame and gain, and they will make any judgment or decision for the sake of fame and gain. In this way, Satan binds people with invisible shackles, and they have neither the strength nor the courage to throw them off. They unknowingly bear these shackles and trudge ever onward with great difficulty for the sake of this fame and gain. Mankind shuns and betrays God and becomes increasingly wicked. In this way, therefore, one generation after another is destroyed in the midst of Satan's fame and gain. What I learned from these words helped me understand that Satan uses these tactics of fame and gain to corrupt people. Satan's methods in this way hurt people and bind them, causing them to betray God.
Yes.
Name and status are what Satan uses to destroy people. I had been led by satanic influences such as every man for himself, or this one, distinguish oneself, and man struggles upwards, water flows downwards. These awful ideas were like mottos to me. I grew more arrogant, and no matter where I was, I'd vie for status and others' attention. Even after gaining faith, I always pursued name and status because I wasn't pursuing the truth. To get these things, I worked hard to improve my own skills, and I had suffered a lot too. I competed with others. My ego inflated whenever I achieved anything, and I scolded brothers and sisters. I was self-conceited, arrogant. I lacked humanity. I was living by satanic philosophies, desperate for name and status. Not only did I hurt others, but I disgusted God. And I impacted the church's work with my transgressions and evil deeds. Name and status have done me so much harm.
Yes.
Indeed.
Only then did I see all these ideas, so harmful, that Satan promotes are fallacies. And living by these falsehoods just leads to even further corruption, making us rebel against and be punished by God.
Right. That's right. Yes.
When I realized all of this, I felt like I'd been treating name and status as lifelines that I had been clinging to. I really was arrogant and so blind. I also saw that it was a path that ran contrary to God. I prayed and repented before God. From that day forward, if I thought about pursuing those things, I would feel frightened. So I would pray and then forsake the flesh. I'd open up to my team, exposing my own corrupt nature.
Thanks be to God.
Then after a while, I didn't have as much desire to pursue name and status, and I felt some inner peace. When the church chose a leader, my desire for name returned when it was time to vote, and I struggled inside. Should I vote for Brother Lee or for myself? I'm not nearly as good at resolving issues through fellowship on the truth. But if he becomes leader, on the chance he actually wins, how will the others see me? I realized that once again, I was seeking fame and status, and thought that frame of mind was really ugly. I prayed to God, cursing and forsaking those thoughts. Later, this passage of God's words came to mind. If your heart is filled with thoughts of how to attain a higher position, or what to do in front of others to get them to admire you, then you are on the wrong path. It means you are doing things for Satan. You are rendering service. If your heart is filled with thoughts of how to change so that you gain more and more of the likeness of a human, are in accord with God's intentions, can submit to Him, are capable of revering Him, show restraint in everything you do, and can completely accept His scrutiny, then your states will get better and better. This is one who lives before God. As such, there are two paths. One merely emphasizes behavior, fulfilling one's own ambitions, desires, intents, and plans. This is living before Satan and living under its domain. The other path emphasizes how to satisfy God's will, enter the reality of the truth, submit to God, have no misunderstandings or disobedience toward Him, all in order to attain reverence for God and perform one's duty well. This is what it means to live before God.
That's right. Yes.
I finally understood what God meant. He looks at the motives behind people's actions. That's important. If all I ever try to gain is my own name for others' esteem, then that is a path against God, and I won't find the truth or be perfected by God.
Yes.
I wanted to fix my motives. No matter if I was elected leader, I would submit to God's arrangements and do my duty well.
Thanks be to God.
When the time came to vote, I thought about principles and voted for Brother Lee. Ultimately, he was picked to lead. I was fine with this outcome. Though I had lost, I had no regrets. Because I put the truth into practice, casting off the shackles of name and status.
Thanks be to God.
I felt such inner peace from practicing the truth and satisfying God. And now I know God's judgment and chastisement are my salvation.
Thanks
Yes.
be to God.
Thank God.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.